My name is Anna Whitman. I'm 31. If you'd met me a year ago, you would have called me steady. The kind of woman who forgives first and asks questions later. I like to think my calmness was strength. I wasn't flashy. I worked hard as a dental hygienist. I loved my mother. I loved Marcus. Not in the fevered, cinematic way people talk about falling in love, but in the steady, shared routines way that feels like scaffolding for the rest of your life. 3 years, small rituals, mutual sarcasm in the mornings, and a vacation booked months in advance to celebrate the fact that we were still choosing each other. Marcus had that easy practice charm. He was 32, handsome in the sort of way that made people listen to him on first impression. He loved a good joke, expensive sunglasses, and being seen as the person who could fix or fund things. On paper, I thought he balanced my carefulness with a kind of reckless generosity. In private, I mistook his quick pivots for spontaneity rather than calculation. We didn't live together. Mismatched schedules, separate leases, we liked it that way. The Vegas trip was our compromise. 4 days in a decent hotel, 2 shows, no drama. I'd set aside $3,000 for it, conservative planning for a conservative couple. We talked about it like it was a small, defiant promise to ourselves. Book the time, make the room ours. For once, don't let life get in the way. 2 weeks before the trip, my world narrowed to one sharp sound. The phone call that told me my mother had fallen. Hip fractured, surgery scheduled. The kind of thing that kneels you down to a small, specific prayer and a practical checklist at once. I packed a duffel that night and drove to her house, my chest hollow with adrenaline and an old, familiar role. Caretaker, daughter, the person who fixes the periphery while someone else gets put back together. I told Marcus over a quiet dinner before I left. His face did something, a flash of disappointment, then a practiced optimism, like someone pulling a smile out of a pocket. "Hey, I can fly out there with you," he offered. "We can postpone Vegas." He twisted his fork like he was making a choice about dessert. "Or," he added, the words small and insistent, "you can take the time with your mom. I'll still go. The room's non-refundable." It was the last word I should have trusted. He wasn't wrong. The hotel was non-refundable. But there was a lightness in how he said it, a tacked-on practicalness that felt less like a compromise and more like a pivot with him still as the center of gravity. "If you want," he said, softening, "I could still use it. Maybe take Brittany. We can make the most of it." He said it like he was arranging furniture. I remember the tiny calibration in his pupils when he mentioned Brittany's name. Not malice, not yet, just the quick arithmetic some people do when they see a loophole. I hesitated for the span of coffee. Then I pictured my mother on the bed, her hand needing mine to steady the first steps after surgery. I pictured Marcus, who'd always told me to put family first. So I gave him the hotel, and because I was a person who believed in shared lives, I did something I only ever did for someone I trusted. I handed him one of my credit cards for emergencies. My card had a $5,000 limit. I remember the tiny voice that hitching in my throat, why would he need it? And the way I dismissed it with love and practicality. "Only for emergencies," I said. He kissed my forehead like it was a benediction. Of course. I left for the hospital the next hour. Surgery went well. The smell of antiseptic and the mechanical whine of monitors became the backdrop to my days and nights. I made tea, scheduled follow-up rehab, and memorized the way my mother's fingers curled when the pain finally subsided. I was tired in a way that felt holy. The tired of someone who has chosen duty over 1,000 lesser things. Night fell. Exhausted, I scrolled my phone to check on Marcus before sleep and froze. The credit card app glowed with an unfamiliar number, $12,200 in charges in a single afternoon. My stomach dropped the way it does when a building you thought was solid shows cracks. There were merchant names I half recognized, a nightclub invoice for $300 and some change, a no restaurant for $340, spa services, boutique retail. My throat tasted of pennies and a metallic disbelief. I texted him, "Hey, saw some charges on the card. Everything okay?" An hour later, a lifetime later, a single reply, breezy, tired. "OMG, babe, prices here are insane. Brittany's covering half." Attached. A selfie. Sunlight on a pool, a cocktail, a smile that seemed practiced in the art of carefree living. The caption, having the time of my life without you. Face-blowing kiss emoji. The sentence lodged between my ribs. I called. No answer. My pulse went steady, then jagged. I called again and left a voice message that hung in the air like hope. Please be careful, I said. That card is for emergencies. He sent another selfie, a nighttime one this time. Bottle service shimmering, laughter framing his face. A charge notification blinked. Designer sunglasses, a boutique sale, $180, $340, $280. I watched the numbers climb like steps up a staircase I'd never signed on to. The next morning, while I sat with my mother through physical therapy, my phone lit up with messages like flares. At first, a confused text from Marcus, card declined at dinner, this is so weird. Then a short, furious voicemail from Brittany accusing me of ruining their trip and calling me controlling. A missed call count that made the phone vibrate on the table. 20, 23. The calls bled into each other until they blurred. I felt something in me change shape. Not the righteous anger of a person wronged. Not yet, but a cold, efficient focus. I logged into the app, called the card company, and lied the smallest, cleanest lie I'd ever told. My card had been stolen. We'll cancel it immediately, they said. Relief smelled like metal and felt like a bandage. When they said they'd reverse charges after the cancellation, I let myself believe it. I was too tired to argue with nuance. My mother needed tea, and I made it with hands that trembled but were steady enough for a cup. Then the calls multiplied. They came from numbers I didn't recognize but knew by tone. Laughter turned shrill. Brittany's thin, accusing voice on voicemail. Marcus alternating between petulant texts and performative outrage. How could you do that? We needed the money, one text read. Another, you took away our emergency. This is abusive. Abusive. The word, hurled like a grenade, lodged in a place that didn't fit it. I pictured myself making a hospital bed tidy, my mother dozing, and on the other end of the country, or a few states away, a man I loved turning my good deed into an accusation. It was a betrayal, yes, but it was also a lesson unspooling in small, devastating increments. That generosity can be weaponized, that for emergencies can be reinterpreted as a permission slip. My hands shook when I read the list of charges again. The club's VIP room, bottle service, a purse that glinted in a merchant's photograph like a false promise. I pressed my forehead to the couch and let out a sound I didn't know I had been carrying, neither sob nor laugh, something raw and new. There were red flags now, small and insistent, the quickness of Marcus's pivot from disappointment to opportunity, the way he had named a friend as co-conspirator without asking. But none of it softened the ache of being far from the person who needed you, while someone close to you decided your absence was a license for spending. I sat on the hospital couch with my mother asleep and the phone burning cold in my lap, and for the first time in a long time, I understood the difference between small compromises and surrender. They told me to sleep at the hospital, a polite way of saying the chairs become your bed when the sun goes down and everyone else goes home. I kept the phone face down on the blanket because the sound of it felt like a verdict. The first morning after the cancellation, the notifications arrived in a shape I hadn't expected. Not a single thunderbolt, but a steady, petty rain. The charges read like a map of someone else's priorities. Bottle service at a club that advertised velvet ropes and neon. A boutique with a name that smelled faintly of Italian leather. A late-night sushi place with prices that made my jaw ache. Each merchant line had a timestamp. I traced them in my head like a detective. Noon, pool cabana. 3 p.m, sunglasses. Late evening, VIP table. The arithmetic was obscene only because of how small it made me feel. Shrink-wrapped to receipts, while my mother relearned how to stand. I tried to call Marcus. He picked up once, and his voice was a practiced mix of apology and annoyance. Babe, it's fine. Brittany's covering it. He sounded like someone reading a prepared statement. Don't worry about it. Focus on your mom. The way he said those last words, as if delivering a medal, was what made me furious in a new, quieter way. He'd weaponized my absence into moral high ground. Look at me. single-handedly handling the practicalities while you do the noble thing. Voicemails stacked up. Brittany's first was a screech. "You can't do this to us. This is humiliating." Then a breathy, embarrassed voice, like someone trying to triangulate between anger and social performance. Demand, guilt, shame, all spun into one. I listened and let them sit like stones in my pocket. I didn't answer most calls. It felt like punctuation to refuse the spectacle. When the initial storm settled, the undercurrent began, the texts that reframed the story before I could. "You reported the card stolen? How could you be so controlling? You've ruined our trip." Each message was a small straw placed on an already frazzled camel's back. Financial abuse. The phrase landed awkwardly inside me. I kept thinking of IV bags and crutches, of the precise, narrow world my mother now occupied. The phrase felt absurd, abusive towards someone who'd just seen her daughter with a hospital bracelet. But when a group decides a narrative, nuance is the first casualty. Then came the email, long, performative, and deliciously entitled. I opened it with the same kind of detached curiosity people have when they read a train wreck headline. It was a manifesto wrapped in grievances, how I'd ruined a vacation, how my selfishness had cost them, how I was controlling not because I had a reason, but because I could. He enumerated imagined slights like a shopping list. At one point he wrote that my action was proof of a deeper mistrust, that perhaps meant we weren't right for each other. The message was venom disguised as concern. I forwarded it to my best friend with one line, "Note how she never asks about my mom." My friend replied with a string of curses and a plan. "Keep receipts. Screenshot everything. Don't engage publicly. Let them do the theatrics. We'll deal with it." There is something steadying about an ally who can translate theater into paperwork. I started keeping a file on my phone. Merchant names, timestamps, screenshots of texts, the voicemail from Brittany. The lawyer joke, my friend who was actually a lawyer, suddenly seemed like more than a punchline. If things went sideways, I wanted a trail. I wanted, in some small way, to prove that what was being spun into a moral failure was actually a straightforward accounting. But the social fallout was immediate. Mutual friends texted, some with angry emojis, others with the cautious, "Are you okay?" That means, "Do you want me to take a side?" A few of our friends let their allegiance be loud. Others waffled. Loyalty has its price when stories are juicy. Marcus's version of events spread with the efficiency of gossip. He had a simpler refrain. "She took away our money. She sabotaged our trip." Reading his posts, clipped, performative little confessions of being stranded, felt like watching a slow-motion theft of the truth. That's what hurt in a new way. Not just that he'd spent my money, but that he'd written himself as the injured party and me as the villain. It's a small cruelty that people can take the imagery of wrong and repaint the victim as the villain with a few well-placed sentences. He was rehearsing a script where he held center stage and I, the one tending a mother's recovery, was the antagonist. Brittany's messages changed from accusing to defensive. Once, in a voice note, she sounded more human. "He promised he'd pay me back. I didn't realize." The insistence faded into something embarrassed and small. Later, a direct message slipped through from her. Blunt, apologetic. She confessed she hadn't been reimbursed for half the trip and was furious at Marcus for leaving her holding so many bills. Her anger was not a defense of my choices, but a recognition that she'd been misled too. The narrative had holes, and in the places where a story falls apart, truth sometimes sneaks through. Meanwhile, Marcus's tactics splintered into the petty and premeditated. He started sending texts late at night that alternated between grandiosity and threat. "You owe me for plans I made," one read. "You ruined my weekend." Another, more performative, "If you don't make this right, I'll have to consider legal options." The mention of lawyers felt theatrical. When I'd asked about other cards, about Brittany, or about his own accounts, the answer was always a sidestep. He described catastrophe where none existed, rent that would go unpaid, bills that would bounce, the exact measure of inconvenience inflated to melodrama. There was an art to how he framed himself as harmed, how he made the practical into the catastrophic. At the hospital, people offered me practical kindness. Someone brought a casserole. Another sat with my mother while I ran errands. The small community of caregivers acted like a counterweight to the public spectacle Marcus was engineering. Their presence was a reminder that care often creates its own quiet gravity. You can be besieged by noise, and still someone will tie your shoelaces. I clung to those acts of steadiness. Then a new move arrived. He wanted to talk like adults. His text read, "I'm back. We need to discuss this. I'll come by at 7. He put a time on it, like a courtroom summons. I replied that I was still at my mother's and couldn't make it. "Are you serious?" he shot back. "This is a relationship emergency." The phrasing was what made me laugh, out loud, half through a spat of incredulous pain. He had weaponized language the way someone frames a courtroom case, turning my real emergency, my mother's recovery, into a comparison he could lose. When I finally ended the day, making my mother tea and smoothing the blanket across a sleeping forehead, a new worry threaded through me. What else would he rewrite? If he could make theft into abuse, what else could he bend? In the dark of my mother's small living room, the answer vibrated like a loose wire. He would try to own the story. He would build a narrative in which he was a martyr, and I, the cruel partner who chose a hospital over a holiday. I pictured the coming days. Headlines spun between friends, calls that tested the limits of civility, the slow erosion of mutual acquaintances. The thing I'd lost on the flight to the hospital wasn't only 3 days in Vegas or a cards limit, it was the version of Marcus I'd believed in. The version that saw me with soft, loyal eyes, and not the one who could recast kindness as wrongdoing. I slept badly that night, the phone quiet at last. There was a small relief that the card was canceled. There was also a hollow place where trust had been. I told myself this: canceling the card was an action. The rest would be a matter of patience and paper. I would keep receipts. I would document. I would not let the story be written for me. And yet, under it all, a pulse of dread kept saying, "This is only the beginning." I woke up to silence. Not peace, just the echo of it. Mom was still asleep, her breathing steady but shallow, the kind of sound that makes you grateful and afraid in the same heartbeat. I tiptoed to the kitchen, poured coffee into a paper cup, and opened my phone. 17 new messages. The first few were from mutual friends, the kind who always begin with, "Hey, just wanted to check in." They didn't want to check in. They wanted to check which side they were supposed to be on. The next ones were from Marcus, long paragraphs alternating between, "You broke my trust," and "I still love you, but you need help." The final one was a text from Brittany, short and cryptic. You should see what he posted. I opened Instagram. Marcus had uploaded a photo from Vegas. Him, alone at a bar, holding a drink. The caption read, "Sometimes the people who preach loyalty are the first to run when life gets inconvenient." The comments were full of sympathy. "Stay strong, man. You deserve better. Some girls can't handle a real man." My name wasn't in the post, but it didn't need to be. Everyone knew. I felt my stomach drop, not because I cared about the followers, but because he was doing what he did best, turning real pain into a performance. I clicked to the next story. There she was, Brittany, posing with 2 friends at the same hotel, champagne in hand, tagging Marcus with a laughing emoji. They'd turned the mess into content, a scandal to post between filters. I locked the phone. My hand was shaking. That afternoon, my friend Maya, the lawyer one, came to the hospital with coffee and a stack of printouts. "Documentation," she said. I blinked. "For what?" "For everything," she replied. "You said he threatened legal action? Then we'll beat him at his own game." She'd already pulled the card statements, time-stamped every transaction, and highlighted his texts. It looked like a case file from a detective show, except the villain wasn't a stranger. It was someone who used to make me breakfast. Maya was calm, surgical. "You're not crazy," she said quietly. "This is financial manipulation. It's not about money. It's about control. He's trying to make you doubt your own story." That sentence, "make you doubt your own story," hit me harder than I expected. Because that's exactly what Marcus had been doing for months, not just with money, but with everything. If he forgot plans, I'd misremembered. If he flirted, I was too sensitive. If I caught him in a lie, he'd say, "You always twist things." Every gaslight flickered in my mind, suddenly visible in perfect, humiliating clarity. Maya noticed. "He rewrites reality," she said softly. "You just stopped letting him hold the pen." That night, Marcus called again. I answered, partly out of exhaustion, partly out of curiosity. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate. "Doing what?" "Destroying me, making me look bad. Everyone's asking questions." I almost laughed. "You made the post, Marcus. I didn't name you. You didn't need to." He sighed, that performative, world-weary sigh of a man convinced he's the protagonist. "I was hurt, Anna. You humiliated me. You canceled everything without even talking to me." "I was in a hospital," I said flatly. "I know, but that doesn't mean..." "Doesn't mean what? That I should fund your vacation while my mother learns to walk again?" He went quiet for a moment. Then, in that old, careful tone, "You've changed." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I just stopped apologizing for being sane." There was a pause, then the click, the end of something invisible. For a few weeks, things went still. I focused on Mom's therapy, learned how to cook bland hospital food, started sleeping without the constant hum of anxiety. I thought the story was over. Then one morning, an email came from Marcus's address, but it wasn't from him. It was from his new girlfriend. Her name was Tessa, and her message was polite, almost professional. "Hi, Anna. I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted to ask about something. Marcus said there was a misunderstanding with a credit card, and it caused a lot of drama. He's been very hurt by how things ended, but he also said you exaggerated the situation. I just want to understand what really happened, because some of the things don't add up. Tessa." My hands shook as I read it. He was still rewriting, still performing. But now he'd found a new audience, someone new to believe the script. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I forwarded it to Maya, who wrote back in 5 words. Weeks passed. The online whispers faded. Brittany unfollowed him. A few friends reached out privately. We didn't know everything, they said, which was their way of asking for forgiveness without admitting guilt. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve closure. They deserve distance. Then, one afternoon, Maya texted me a link. Local news. Financial dispute escalates between couple over shared credit account. It was Marcus's new game. He had tried to file a complaint claiming defamation and emotional distress. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Maya had already sent the statements, texts, and screenshots to his attorney. The case died before it began. But the real twist wasn't in court. It was what came a week later, when Tessa called me directly. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry," she said. "He did the same thing to me." He'd used her card this time, claimed it was for a surprise, canceled her access when she questioned it, then told everyone she was unstable. I listened, silent, while she cried. Then I said the only thing that felt true. He doesn't love people. He recruits them. That night, after weeks of noise, I sat beside Mom's bed. She was stronger now, walking small distances, smiling again. She looked at me and said, "You look lighter." I smiled back. I finally learned to stop explaining myself to people who enjoy misunderstanding me. But then, 2 months later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name and handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a single photograph, the Vegas bar, the same one from his post. On the back, scrawled in pen, "You'll always be the one that got away." I stared at it for a long time. Then, very calmly, I set it on the counter, struck a match, and watched the edges curl into silence. The ashes of that photograph lingered longer than I expected. They left a faint scorch mark on the counter, a quiet reminder that even paper can haunt. For a few weeks, I told myself it was over. Marcus had moved on, Tessa had cut him off, Mom was walking again, and I was learning what peace sounded like. It wasn't silence. It was the absence of having to explain myself. But peace, I've learned, doesn't arrive clean. It drips, and one day, it stains. It started with an email from an old acquaintance, Nora, a friend of a friend from years back. Her message was cautious. "Hey, Anna, I hope this isn't strange. I remember you dated Marcus a while ago. I'm reaching out because I think he's doing something similar again. Not to me, to my sister." Attached were screenshots, texts that looked uncomfortably familiar, the same phrasing, the same tone. "Trust me, babe, I'll handle it. You worry too much about money. I thought you were the grounded one." He was running the same script, word for word. But there was something new this time. Beneath one of the texts, Nora's sister had written, "He said his ex tried to ruin him with false claims. Some hospital story." My breath caught. He was still using me, as a ghost to keep others in line. That night, I opened my old hard drive, the one I'd kept in a drawer, full of photos and backups from our years together. I hadn't looked at it since the breakup, but I needed to see if there were signs, breadcrumbs I'd missed. I clicked through the folders. Birthdays, vacations, random pictures. Each thumbnail was a small lie I used to believe in. Marcus smiling beside me, arm around my shoulder, the practiced look of a man rehearsing affection. Then I found a folder labeled Me See. Inside were PDFs, receipts, screenshots, dozens of them, all dated from before we even moved in together. And here was the twist. The credit card wasn't the first time. There were hotel bills under my name, flight tickets I hadn't booked, subscriptions I'd canceled months ago, reactivated through my account. All of it traced back years, quiet siphoning that had gone unnoticed because I'd trusted him. I remember sitting there, the blue glow of the laptop on my face, whispering out loud, "He's been doing this all along." The next day, I met Maya at a cafe. I handed her a flash drive. She plugged it in, scrolled silently, then exhaled. "Okay," she said, "this isn't just messy. This is systematic. He's been running a pattern of financial dependency, getting partners to fund his lifestyle under emotional pressure." "Like a con?" I asked. She nodded. "Not professional, just habitual. He doesn't scam for money, he scams for control." That word, habitual, stuck. It made him sound less like a villain and more like a disease that never stopped feeding. Weeks later, Maya called me. "You'll want to sit down for this." Apparently, Nora's sister had gone to the police after discovering unauthorized charges too. Marcus's name came up in the report, and my case, though never filed officially, helped build a pattern. It wasn't enough for a criminal conviction, but it was enough to make him radioactive in his social circle. The man who once weaponized image was now buried under it. He tried to post an apology, a slick video full of half-truths and practiced remorse. "I've made mistakes," he said. "I hurt people because I was hurting too." The comments were merciless. Screenshots, timelines, receipts. His own words turned against him. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the story, and I didn't even have to speak. Mom got better. We moved her into a small sunlit apartment filled with plants and quiet. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "You know, when you were little, you always wanted to fix broken things. You thought if you loved them enough, they'd stop being sharp." I smiled. "And did they?" She shook her head. "No, darling, but you stopped bleeding." Then, one evening, as I was deleting old files, I found a recording I didn't remember making. It was from my phone's voice memos, a pocket recording from months ago during one of Marcus's monologues. I pressed play. "You always make me feel like the bad guy, Anna. You twist things until I don't even recognize myself." "I'm just asking why there's a $600 charge on my card." "Because you don't trust me. That's the problem. You make everything transactional. You think love is about keeping score." Hearing it now, with distance, was like watching a play I'd once been trapped in. The manipulation was so clean, so rehearsed, that it almost impressed me. Almost. I saved the audio, renamed the file. Proof of pattern. Months passed. Life found rhythm again. I got a new job, started therapy, even laughed at dinner without feeling guilty. And then one day, Tessa texted me. "You were right," she wrote. "He's leaving town. Apparently some investors backed out because of what came out online." I stared at the message, unsure how to feel. Relief? Closure? Pity? Maybe all of them, maybe none. That night, I walked past the cafe where Marcus and I had our first date. The same table by the window was empty. I stood there for a moment, watching the reflection of myself in the glass. The same face, but sharper now, clearer. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of the story. I felt like its author. But the twist, the final one, came a week later. I got a call from an unknown number, a woman's voice, polite but trembling. "Hi, is this Anna Bennett? You don't know me. My name is Dr. Harper. I'm calling because Marcus listed you as his emergency contact." The world went still. "He was in an accident," she said. "He's stable, but he's asking for you." The drive to the hospital felt like déjà vu. Same fluorescent skyline, same numb hands on the steering wheel. Only this time it wasn't my mother inside fighting to recover. It was him. For most of the drive, I rehearsed what I'd say if I saw him. "You got what you deserved. Or maybe, I don't owe you anything. But the truth was simpler. I didn't even know why I was going. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure, maybe to prove to myself that I could look him in the eyes and feel nothing. The nurse led me down a quiet hallway that smelled of antiseptic and metal. Room 412, she said. He's conscious, but weak. When I stepped in, I barely recognized him. Marcus's face was pale, a bruise blooming near his temple, arm in a sling. The man who once obsessed over appearance now looked human. Fragile. He turned his head slowly when he heard my voice. Anna. My name cracked out of him like it hurt to say. I stood near the door. They said you wanted to see me. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't. He smiled weakly. Guess I should have figured you'd show up. You always did the right thing. I didn't come for you, I said, steady. I came to make sure I don't owe you anything, not even resentment. He closed his eyes. I wasn't drunk. You'll probably hear rumors, but I wasn't. Some kid ran a light. Tessa was there. Tessa? I asked, startled. She was giving me a ride home from a meeting. She's okay. Just a few stitches. The mention of her name twisted something in my chest. Relief, guilt, maybe both. He looked at me again, softer this time. You hated me. No, I said. I hated what you made me believe about myself. He swallowed. You were right. About the card. About everything. That's not an apology, Marcus. That's acknowledgement. He nodded faintly. I don't think I have an apology left that would mean anything. Silence. Just the rhythmic beep of the monitor. He looked smaller than I remembered, like all the arrogance had drained out of him, leaving behind something hollow. After a long pause, he whispered, They told me I might not walk properly again. Spinal damage. Ironic, huh? The guy who stood on everyone else's back finally can't stand on his own. My throat tightened, but I didn't move closer. He reached for the water cup with his good hand, trembling. Instinct took over. I stepped forward and held it steady for him. He met my eyes. You still care? I care that you're human, I said quietly. But that's where it ends. When I left his room, I stopped by the hallway window. The sun was setting, the same golden hour that once painted his apartment walls while we fought about money and meaning. The difference now was that the light felt warm, not sharp. It didn't expose anything. It simply was. That night, I visited Mom. She was on her balcony, trimming her plants. She looked at me once and said, You went, didn't you? I nodded. Good, she said. Closure isn't about forgiveness. It's about ending the sentence with a period instead of a question mark. A week later, a letter arrived. The return address, Marcus Cole. Inside, a single page in his handwriting. Anna, I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know something. You were the only person who ever saw through me and still stayed long enough to ask why. That terrified me more than losing money, or status, or even my name. I don't want to fix the past. I just want to stop infecting the future. If you're reading this, I guess I survived. Thank you for teaching me that control isn't love. E. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a record. Proof that people like him could face their reflection, even for a second. Months passed. I didn't hear from him again. Rumor had it he moved out of state, started working for a small nonprofit, something with counseling or recovery. Maybe he was trying, maybe not. But either way, it was no longer my responsibility to check. One evening, I found myself back at the same cafe from our first date. This time, I wasn't looking for ghosts. I was meeting someone new, someone kind, quiet, with laughter that didn't sound like manipulation. When he asked, So, what's your story? I smiled and said, It's a long one, but it has a good ending. He laughed. Then start wherever it stops hurting. And for the first time, I could. Before leaving, I walked past the window where I once sat with Marcus years ago. Outside, the city pulsed. Alive, imperfect, honest. In the reflection, I didn't see the woman who was betrayed. I saw the woman who rebuilt.